Before we can talk about the magnificent gold sovereign, we must first look at the coins that jingled in the purses of medieval Englishmen. Gold has always been the metal of kings, a symbol of immense wealth and power. For centuries, England didn't have its own gold coin. Instead, merchants and nobles might have used gold coins from Europe, like the Florentine florin. This all changed in the 14th century. King Edward III wanted to show England's growing importance. He introduced a beautiful gold coin called the Noble. It was a stunning piece of metalwork. It showed the king on a ship holding a sword and shield, ready for anything. This coin wasn't just money, it was a powerful statement about England's naval strength and its king's authority. The Noble was a very successful coin and was used for over 100 years. It was worth 6 shillings and 8 pence, which was a lot of money back then. It was too valuable for everyday shopping, of course. You wouldn't use a noble to buy a loaf of bread. This was the currency of international trade, of rich merchants and of the aristocracy. Following the Noble, other gold coins came and went. One of the most famous was the Angel, introduced by King Edward IV. It featured the Archangel Michael slaying a dragon. This powerful religious image was thought to bring good luck and even have healing powers. People believed touching the coin could cure a skin disease called the King's Evil. These coins were beautiful and valuable, but they were part of a rather complicated and sometimes messy monetary system. The weights and purity of coins could change. This made trade tricky. If a merchant from another country wasn't sure about the value of your coins, doing business was difficult. By the end of the 15th century, a new dynasty had come to power. The Tudors had arrived. The first Tudor king, Henry VII, had won his crown on the battlefield at the Battle of Bosworth Field. He needed to show everyone, both in England and across Europe, that he was the rightful king and that his new dynasty was strong, stable, and here to stay. So, while coins like the Noble and the Angel were impressive, Henry VII felt he needed something more. He wanted a coin that was bigger, heavier, and more spectacular than anything that had come before. It needed to be a coin that screamed power and majesty. It couldn't be just another piece of gold, it had to be a masterpiece. This new coin would be a tool of propaganda, a golden messenger sent out across the land and beyond. It would carry the image of the king and deliver a clear message. The Tudor dynasty was rich, powerful, and blessed by God. This desire for a truly regal coin would lead to the birth of the very first sovereign. In the year 1489, King Henry VII made a bold decision. He commanded his mint to produce a brand new gold coin. This wasn't just an update of an old design. It was something entirely new and incredibly ambitious. Henry had a very clear goal. After years of civil war, known as the Wars of the Roses, he needed to cement his authority. He had to prove his legitimacy. A magnificent new coin would be the perfect way to do it. This coin was to be called the Sovereign, a name that left no doubt about who was in charge. It was designed to impress, to awe, and to project an image of unparalleled royal power to the world. The first sovereign was a truly remarkable object. It was the largest and heaviest gold coin ever minted in England up to that point. It was struck from 23-carat gold, which is almost pure gold, making it incredibly precious. It had a value of exactly £1 or 20 shillings, which was a huge sum of money. This wasn't a coin for the common folk. It was a coin for presenting to foreign dignitaries, for high-level state transactions, and for the wealthiest members of the court. Its sheer size and weight were a physical demonstration of the wealth of the English crown under its new, savvy Tudor monarch. The design of the coin was a masterclass in royal propaganda. On one side, the obverse, it showed King Henry VII seated on his coronation throne. He wasn't just a face on a coin, he was a full figure, dressed in his magnificent coronation robes, holding the orb and scepter, the symbols of his kingly power. This image was designed to be imposing. It showed a monarch in full command, a figure of justice and authority. The message was clear. This was not just a warlord who had seized power, but a divinely appointed king, secure on his throne. It was a portrait of stability and permanence. The other side, the reverse, was just as symbolic. It featured a large, intricate Tudor rose. This wasn't just any rose. It combined the red rose of the House of Lancaster with the white rose of the House of York. Henry, a Lancastrian, had married Elizabeth of York, uniting the two warring houses and ending the Wars of the Roses. The Tudor rose on the coin was a powerful symbol of this new unity and peace. At the centre of the rose was a shield bearing the royal arms of England. The whole design was a celebration of the end of conflict and the dawn of a new, glorious Tudor age, all encapsulated in a single beautiful piece of gold. The sovereign was such a powerful symbol that it continued to be minted by Henry VII's successors. Each Tudor monarch who followed him used the coin to tell their own story. It became a kind of royal family album, struck in gold, reflecting the personality and politics of each reign. When Henry VIII came to the throne, he was young, confident, and extravagant. His sovereigns reflected this. He continued to use the grand design of the enthroned monarch, but the portrait was unmistakably him, a broader, more imposing figure. As his reign progressed, and he broke with the Church of Rome, the coin's design subtly changed to reinforce his new title as head of the Church of England. The coin also suffered from Henry VIII's financial troubles. To fund his lavish lifestyle and expensive wars, Henry began to debase the coinage. This meant he reduced the amount of precious metal in the coins, mixing it with cheaper base metals. The gold sovereigns of his later reign were made of less pure 22-carat gold, a standard that would eventually become the norm. This act, known as the Great Debasement, damaged England's financial reputation. It was a sign that even the most powerful symbols of wealth were not immune to the political and economic pressures of the time. The golden image of the king was slightly tarnished by his desperate need for cash. After Henry VIII, his young son Edward VI came to the throne. His reign saw further changes to the sovereign. For a time, the design was altered dramatically. The image of the king on the throne was replaced with a half-length portrait of the young king holding a sword and orb. The reverse design also changed, showing a royal shield supported by a lion and a dragon. These changes reflected the Protestant Reformation that was in full swing. Then came Mary I, Henry's Catholic daughter. Her sovereigns are incredibly interesting because for a time they featured a joint portrait of her and her husband, Philip II of Spain. They are shown facing each other, a symbol of their political and personal union. Finally, we come to Elizabeth I, the last of the Tudor monarchs. Her long and glorious reign saw the restoration of a stable, high-quality coinage. Her sovereigns were beautiful coins, struck in fine gold. They returned to the classic design of the monarch enthroned, but the portrait was unmistakably Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. The coin was a key part of her brand. It projected an image of majesty, stability, and Protestant strength. Throughout the Tudor period, the sovereign was more than just money. It was a canvas for royal messaging, a golden document that charted the dramatic religious and political shifts of one of England's most turbulent and fascinating centuries. When Queen Elizabeth I died in 1603, the Tudor dynasty ended and the Stuart era began. The new king was James VI of Scotland, who became James I of England. This union of the Scottish and English crowns was a momentous event, and the coinage of the realm had to reflect it. James I continued to mint the magnificent sovereign, but he also introduced new coins to celebrate his new United Kingdom of Great Britain. The sovereign was soon joined by a new gold coin called the Unite, which was valued at 20 shillings, just like the sovereign. The Unite featured a different design, often showing a bust of the king rather than the full enthroned figure. As the 17th century progressed, the sovereign began to fall out of fashion. Under James I and his son, Charles I, other gold coins became more prominent. The Unite and the Laurel, another gold coin featuring the king wearing a Roman-style laurel wreath, became the main large gold coins in circulation. This was a period of immense political turmoil, culminating in the English Civil War. King Charles I desperately needed money to fund his armies, and he minted coins wherever he could, sometimes in makeshift mints during the conflict. These siege pieces are often crude, but they are powerful historical artifacts from a time of national crisis. After the execution of Charles I and the brief period of the Commonwealth under Oliver Cromwell, the monarchy was restored in 1660. The new king, Charles II, wanted to modernise the country, and that included its coinage. In 1663, a major change happened. The old method of making coins by hand, using a hammer, was replaced by new machinery. This allowed coins to be produced that were perfectly round, with sharp, detailed designs. It was the dawn of a new age of minting technology. With this new technology came a brand new gold coin, which was to become one of the most famous and romantic in British history. This new coin was the guinea. It was named after the Guinea coast of West Africa, where the English sourced much of their gold. The guinea was worth 21 shillings, and it quickly became the principal gold coin of the kingdom. It was so popular and so trusted that it dominated British currency for the next 150 years. With the arrival of the machine-made guinea, the story of the original hammered sovereign came to an end. The name and the tradition lay dormant, waiting for a new crisis and a new era to bring it back to life. The first chapter of the sovereign's history was closed. Fast forward nearly 150 years. Britain was, well, a different world. It had been through immense change and was now locked in a titanic struggle with Napoleon's France. The Napoleonic Wars were honestly incredibly expensive. Britain had to fund not only its own armies, but also those of its allies. To do this, the government spent vast amounts of gold, and by the early 19th century, gold coins had all but vanished from circulation. People used paper banknotes instead. When the wars finally ended in 1815, with victory at the Battle of Waterloo, the country's finances were, frankly, in a mess. The coinage was in a poor state, and something had to be done to restore confidence. The government's solution was a massive reform known as the Great Recoinage of 1816. This was a complete overhaul of Britain's money. The aim was to create a new, stable and reliable currency based on a gold standard. This meant that the value of British money would be fixed to a specific amount of gold. To be the flagship of this new system, the government decided to bring back an old, prestigious name. They revived the sovereign, but this would be a new, modern sovereign, perfectly suited for a new industrial age. It was to be a symbol of Britain's economic recovery and its growing global power. The new sovereign, first struck in 1817, during the reign of King George III, was a masterpiece of design and engineering. It was smaller and lighter than its Tudor predecessor, but it was made to an incredibly precise standard. It was minted in 22-carat gold and weighed exactly 7.98 grams. Its value was set at £1 sterling or 20 shillings. These exact specifications were crucial. They meant that anyone, anywhere in the world, could trust the sovereign. They knew exactly how much gold it contained. This reliability was the key to its future success as a global currency. But what really made the new sovereign famous was its stunning reverse design. The master engraver at the Royal Mint was a brilliant, but, well, hot-tempered Italian artist named Benedetto Pistrucci. He was commissioned to create a design for the new coin. Instead of a traditional coat of arms, Pistrucci chose a dynamic and classical image. St. George, the patron saint of England, on horseback, slaying a dragon. This design was revolutionary. It was full of action and energy, a powerful allegory of good triumphing over evil. It was the perfect symbol for a nation that had just defeated Napoleon. This iconic design, paired with the portrait of the monarch on the other side, created the modern sovereign we know today. The new sovereign was born at the perfect moment. The 19th century was the dawn of the British Empire's greatest expansion. As Britain's influence spread across the globe, so did its money. The gold sovereign became the world's most trusted coin. It was the currency of international trade, the chief coin of the world. Merchants in Hong Kong, bankers in India, and wool farmers in Australia all knew and trusted the sovereign. Its precise gold content and the might of the British Empire behind it meant it was accepted everywhere without question. It was as good as gold because it gold. The demand for sovereigns was so immense that the Royal Mint in London couldn't keep up. To solve this problem, the decision was made to open branch mints in other parts of the empire. This was a radical idea. For the first time, an identical British coin would be struck outside of Britain. The first branch mint opened in Sydney, Australia in 1855 to turn the gold from the Australian gold rushes into sovereigns. More mints followed in Melbourne and Perth. Later, branch mints were also opened in Canada. That's Ottawa, India, that's Bombay, and South Africa, that's Pretoria. You can tell where a sovereign was made by looking for a tiny letter, a mint mark, on the coin, such as S for Sydney or M for Melbourne. The long reign of Queen Victoria from 1837 to 1901 is often called the Golden Age of the sovereign. During her time on the throne, hundreds of millions of sovereigns were minted. The coin featured several different portraits of the Queen as she aged, from the beautiful young head portrait of her as a girl to the Jubilee head, and finally the dignified old head or widow head portrait from her later years. These coins trace the life of the monarch who presided over the peak of Britain's imperial power. A Victorian sovereign wasn't just a piece of money. It was a tangible link to this era of incredible industrial, military and territorial expansion. Carrying a pocketful of sovereigns was a sign of wealth and respectability. They were used to pay for everything from ship cargoes to salaries. They were stored in bank vaults, hidden under floorboards, and sewn into the linings of clothes by people emigrating to new lands. The coin's journey across the world meant that it became a part of the history of many different nations, not just Britain. It was the financial backbone of a globalized economy, all centered on London. The humble gold sovereign was, in many ways, the coin that built an empire and powered a century of trade. The 20th century brought an abrupt and dramatic end to the golden age of the sovereign. The outbreak of the First World War in 1914 changed everything. Wars are incredibly expensive, and the British government needed to gather all its resources to pay for the conflict. Gold was one of the most important of these resources. In a famous patriotic appeal, the government asked citizens to turn in their gold sovereigns and exchange them for paper money. The slogan was, "Your country needs your gold." People queued up at banks to hand over their precious coins, believing it was their duty to help the war effort. As a result, gold coins quickly vanished from everyday circulation. They were no longer used in shops or for paying wages. The government hoarded the gold to pay for war materials from other countries, particularly the United States. The era of gold as a circulating currency in Britain was over. Although the Royal Mint in London did mint some sovereigns during the war, dated 1917, these were mainly used for international payments and were not seen by the public. After the war, Britain tried to return to the gold standard, but the economy was too weak. A few more sovereigns were struck in 1925, but the attempt failed. The Great Depression of the 1930s sealed the deal. Gold coins would not return to people's pockets. The story was similar during the Second World War. Gold was once again a vital strategic asset. The Royal Mint was enlisted to perform a secret and fascinating task. It struck millions of gold sovereigns, all bearing the old 1925 date. This was done to maintain secrecy. These coins were not for circulation in Britain. They were packed into small metal boxes and used by spies and special agents operating behind enemy lines in Europe and the Middle East. A sovereign was a universal currency that could be used to pay for information, to bribe officials, or to fund resistance movements. It was the perfect tool for espionage, a silent and valuable weapon in a secret war. By the end of the Second World War, the world's financial system had changed completely. The gold standard was abandoned, and the age of the sovereign as a circulating coin of the realm was well and truly over. For a period of time, the only sovereigns being produced were these secret backdated coins for covert operations. The coin that had once been the symbol of global trade and imperial might had become a ghost, a relic of a bygone era. It seemed as though the story of the sovereign might finally be at an end, destined to be remembered only in museums and history books. For more than 2 decades after the war, the sovereign production lines lay silent. The coin's practical role as money was over. However, the demand for gold never went away. People around the world, particularly in the Middle East and Asia, still trusted gold as a store of value. There was a huge international market for gold coins, but Britain was not a part of it. To combat a rise in counterfeit sovereigns and to meet this global demand, the Royal Mint made a landmark decision. In 1957, the production of sovereigns was restarted. This time, however, they weren't for spending in shops. They were produced as bullion coins. These new sovereigns, featuring the first portrait of the young Queen Elizabeth II, were intended for investors and collectors. They were sold for the value of their gold content, plus a small premium. The 1957 sovereign marked the beginning of a new chapter in the coin's history. It was no longer just a monetary unit, it was a globally traded investment vehicle and a desirable collector's item. Production continued for many years, and as time went by, the Royal Mint began to produce special proof versions, struck to a much higher quality finish specifically for the collector market. The sovereign had successfully reinvented itself for the modern world. The sovereign has continued to feature the portraits of the reigning monarch. Over her long reign, Queen Elizabeth II was depicted in 5 different official portraits on the sovereign, charting her journey from a young queen to a revered head of state. This tradition continues today. Following the accession of King Charles III, the Royal Mint issued new sovereigns featuring his portrait. This ensures that the coin remains a living piece of history, directly connected to the monarchy. The classic St. George and the Dragon design by Pistrucci has remained the most common reverse, a powerful link to the coin's relaunch in 1817. Today, the sovereign is more popular than ever. It is cherished by gold investors, known as stackers, who buy the coins as a hedge against economic uncertainty. It is also adored by numismatists or coin collectors who seek out different dates, mint marks, and special commemorative editions. The Royal Mint now issues sovereigns every year in a range of finishes and sets. They are given as traditional gifts for christenings and special birthdays. The coin has completed its transformation from a tool of royal propaganda to an imperial currency, to a modern bullion coin and a cherished collector's piece, securing its survival for the 21st century and beyond. What makes one gold sovereign worth a fortune, while another is worth only the value of its gold? For collectors, the answer lies in a magical combination of rarity, history, and condition. Some sovereigns are incredibly valuable because very few of them were ever minted, or because very few have survived to the present day. For example, the 1819 sovereign is one of the rarest and most sought after. For a long time, experts thought only a handful existed. Discovering one is the dream of every collector. Similarly, sovereigns from the short reign of Edward VIII, who abdicated in 1936, are phenomenally rare. Only a tiny number were ever produced as trial pieces and were never issued, making them almost priceless. The coin's mint mark can also have a huge impact on its value. A sovereign from a particular year might be common if it was minted in London, but extremely rare if it was struck at one of the branch mints. For example, the 1920 Sydney Mint sovereign is a legendary rarity. While millions of sovereigns were made in London that year, the Sydney Mint produced only a tiny number, and finding one today is incredibly difficult. Even the condition of the coin is vital. A coin that has never been circulated and looks as fresh as the day it was made will be worth far more than one that is worn and scratched from its time in circulation. Beyond its monetary value, the gold sovereign holds a unique place in Britain's cultural heritage. It is a golden thread that runs through more than 500 years of the nation's history. The story of the sovereign is the story of Britain. It tells of the ambition of Tudor kings, the turmoil of the Stuart era, the industrial and imperial might of the Victorian age, the sacrifice of the world wars, and the nation's ability to adapt and reinvent itself in the modern era. Each coin is a miniature historical document, a piece of art you can hold in your hand, connecting you directly to the people and events of the past. In conclusion, the gold sovereign is far more than just a coin. It is a masterpiece of minting craft, a reliable store of wealth, and a powerful symbol of British identity. From its origins as a tool of propaganda for Henry VII to its role as the backbone of a global empire, and its modern revival as a cherished collector's item, the sovereign has endured. It represents stability, tradition, and quality. The iconic image of St. George slaying the dragon remains a potent symbol of resilience and triumph. The golden journey of the sovereign is a testament to the coin's timeless appeal and its unwavering status as the king of coins.